Welcome to Drop and Give Me 20, where you learn keys to entrepreneurial success as Lindsay Germono interviews business owners with military backgrounds on what works and what doesn't. Listen as they focus on the stories, both challenges and wins, that military entrepreneurs have faced in growing their businesses.
Welcome to another episode of Drop and Give Me 20. I am your host, Lindsay Germono. Amanda started giggling because it was just like really quiet. And then I was like, boom.
That's true.
Yeah. Drop and Give Me 20 is brought to you by Germono Advertising Company. We are a full service marketing firm located in the Norfolk, Virginia area. We thank all of our listeners. And today, so Amanda, I'm so glad that you were telling me what you were telling me before I hit record, because like the topic of this podcast is
Podcast, yeah.
Yeah, and I met Amanda, I don't know, Amanda, like a year or two ago. I can't remember. But
I think it's 2 years.
It's crazy. And we have stayed connected. I'm a champion of her and all of her efforts that she's doing. But I reached out to Amanda because one of the things that we are, doing in the podcast is really kind of theming the topics for season 4. And so the theme of this one is podcasting. Amanda, I know you were blogging first. So tell me how you migrated from, how did you make the switch from, blogging to podcasting?
I think it was more like I built on the fact that I was blogging, and I used the marketing stuff that I had learned from all my years of blogging, and then I took that and then I just added in the audio editing, and because a lot of the behind the scenes, like uploading stuff, you do that in blogging. So I kind of just used the blogging as my foundation and then just learned the audio side of podcasting.
So tell everybody the name of your podcast.
My podcast is called Women of the Military.
Okay. And then it's brought to you by Airman and give us your overarching introduction.
So my blog is airmantomom.com, and my LLC is under Airman to Mom LLC, and the Women of the Military podcast is under that. And I also have a book called Women of the Military, where I share stories of women who have either served in the military or are currently serving in the military.
I didn't tell you I was going to ask you this.
That's okay.
But I want to hear, what is your favorite Women of the Military story?
I hate when
I know. Okay, just pick one recently. I'll just do it that way.
Well, a couple weeks ago, I had a granddaughter of a World War II veteran, and she told the story of her grandmother who was a WASP pilot in World War II, and I feel like I'm totally unqualified because I don't know any military history, and I learned all this history through interviewing her, reading the books she wrote about her grandmother and what they went through after she died to get her buried at Arlington. And so that one was just really cool because I want to capture stories of military history, and to go all the way back to World War II was really exciting.
What an amazing legacy for her grandchild to be sharing that. Could you imagine? That's we think of our legacy that we're leaving now, but do we think about it, generations from us, more than one generation? That's right. Awesome. I also want to hear from you. You have the podcast, but when I was on your website, there are different themes, different topic that you've, kind of grouped together. Can you talk to us about that process and what got you there?
You mean on the top part?
Yeah. You have the deployment series. You have different series.
So I started with blogging. I was all over the map. I thought if you just wrote about everything, people would come, but that doesn't work. And so that was a journey in itself. But I did notice that people were most interested in my veteran piece and my deployment. And so I did a deployment series in 2017. And I was hoping that I would get, I didn't know what I was going to get, but I definitely didn't expect to get almost all women to respond. And that was kind of a light bulb moment of I'm a woman. I served in the military. There's other women too, and they want to tell their stories, and I'm kind of a safe place for them to tell because I'm a woman and there's not a lot of women out sharing their stories. And so, and I was fascinated by the stories that they told. So it was kind of all those things that kind of pushed me into being in the women veteran and the veteran space. And so yeah, I talk a little bit about military life, and that's kind of my old blogging stuff, and then my podcast and the book, and then the stories of military women.
I read an interview that you did on Military Spouse magazine, and it said that one of the challenges that you were facing as you transitioned from active duty to military spouse, that you found that was very difficult for you for a lot of different reasons. But one of the things I found fascinating in what you wrote was that you felt, and then you decided to have children and stay at home mom, and you thought that was going to be, what you wanted to do, but you felt lost, and you felt like you needed to have more, an additional purpose in addition to, of course, motherhood. That's fascinating to me.
Yeah.
Was that hard to kind of get to?
It was really hard because I grew up thinking I'm going to be a mom and it's going to be like, it's going to fill me so much. But becoming a mom in like the first year of motherhood I haven't met anyone who was like, oh, it was a cakewalk. Like it's really hard. And looking back, I was like, maybe transitioning out of the military and becoming a mom at the same time was not a good idea, because I was dealing with the emotions of losing my identity and my purpose of being in the military. And then I was also like breaking up with the person I used to be, where I could just do whatever I wanted and I didn't have to worry about my kids and my husband and all that stuff.
I like to talk about all of these things because, when we start talking about like, why did you start podcasting? I've never heard anybody go, I aspired to be a podcaster.
Right.
Like that was my dream come true. But when I met Amanda and she was blogging, and it was before you actually created the book. Like, I think you were in the process of doing that. And then of course, before the podcast, I will say, and there are a lot of people in our community that are also podcasters, layering in a podcast element opens other doors for your business. And so when we got on this right before I hit record, share with the listeners, if you can, what you shared with me about some of those opportunities that lately have come your way because of your presence out into, something like podcasting.
I was contacted by a radio station in Missouri, and they want to start airing my podcast regularly on their radio station, which is super exciting and super, like, I still like, me? Are you sure? And so,
yes, they're sure.
So it was really exciting, because it's like you said, there's so many opportunities that have like opened up this year. And I don't know if you know, but I was on Fox Business in November, and that was like, I pitched myself and then I didn't expect to hear anything back. And then I got picked up to be on the morning show, and it was just crazy, like all this stuff that happens, and just because the blog and the podcast and the book and all the hard work that I've been doing.
When you're standing next to somebody like Amanda, and I've had the honor of standing next to her at various networking things that we've been at, conferences and stuff. She is very approachable. I'm talking about you like you're not here, but for the listeners, she's very approachable. I am not. I recognize that. I don't know why. I just have RBF. But Amanda, you are very approachable. And one of the things I really respect about you is your amount of this takes a tremendous amount of bravery to approach, a major television station with your story. And many of our listeners may not feel they're at that level, or that, people are interested in them. What's your take on that?
Well, my mentor was like, this is what you need to do. And I was like, okay. And so they had a form, and I just filled it out and was like, check, now like my mentor won't bother me anymore. So I think having someone that holds you accountable, who like gives you goals where you're not ready. Like, I wasn't ready to be on Fox News, but then I put in my name and was like, good job. Never going to hear from them. And then I did. And so, and I put my name into like CNN and all these other ones too, and I didn't hear anything. But the fact that like I just did it, and then you never know what's going to happen. And like, what's the worst thing that'll happen? They'll say no, like, or they don't respond. So it just takes a little bit of your time, and so I just try and look at it that way. What's the worst that's going to happen?
This is a motto of mine, is what's the worst that could happen? They can say no. I was in sales for a long time, and I guess I still am. I just migrated over to marketing and advertising, which is sales.
Right.
And one of the things that I kind of live by is like, yeah, what's the worst that's going to happen? They're going to say no, and then great, I have a no, and I can move on.
Right.
And that's fine. And sometimes I just want to hear a no instead of a maybe, or call me later. Like, just say no.
Right.
What's your process for podcasting from idea conception? Like, how do you, for those that are listening, maybe they're thinking about, maybe I should add a podcast. What's your process? How do you record, edit, all of that? What do you use?
So I use Squadcast to record, and I use Calendly like you to set up the interviews. And I also have a Google form. I guess I should start at the beginning. I have a Google form where I have people sign up, and if you're a woman and a veteran, or if you have a really good pitch that fits into the women of the military, because I have had a few of those, then you can be on the podcast. And I don't do any screening besides that. I just say woman veteran, and then the stories, they just speak for themselves, because that's what I've been doing. Mm-hmm. And then I batch record, so I recorded in August through October, and I'm not going to record again until March. And so I record a lot. I lose my mind. And so I use Squadcast to record, and then I edit on my own. And before the interview happens, I have a standard set of questions I ask people. So I have a email set up so that it sends it out the week before so people can get prepared. But it basically starts with, why did you join? And what would you tell girls who are considering the military? And then whatever's in between. And then for the editing, I use Adobe Audition, and I found out I'm a perfectionist. So I'm actually looking into hiring an editor, because even though I love editing, because I love hearing the stories and I get to listen to them again, and if it's a friend that I know pretty well, then it's really fun, because I get to talk to them. It takes a lot of time, and so I'm looking to outsource that part of it, and then I just upload the audio and share it on social media.
Where do you upload the audio to? Where do you house your podcast?
I'm on Anchor right now.
Okay. All right. And then it goes to social media.
Yes.
So So I need to tell folks, because they think that podcasting is the most difficult thing. It's not. It does have its steps, like Amanda said. Okay, so these are the steps. See if I got it right, Amanda. You have the Google form. Then from there, you get your guests to make sure that they qualify for the right fit. So that's the other thing, too. When you're starting podcasting, be very specific on who you want to have on and what your topics are. We have people that will come on that are not military business owners or not military entrepreneurs. And unfortunately, I can't accept them into the podcast, because the podcast is military entrepreneurship. So,
right.
Sorry, I always feel awful about that. But anyway, okay, so she has the Google form. She has the Calendly, which is a website that you can go and pre-populate your availability in. So then you send that link to, as many interested guests that you have, so everybody can pick the time and date that works for them, right?
Mm-hmm.
Okay. Then you batch record. I used to not batch record, and it made me effing bananas. So batch recording means you're picking a day, and you're maybe doing 3 that day, and then, the next week, you pick certain days and you record a couple episodes in that day. I batch record. I didn't used to do that. Now I do it. Game changer. All right. Then she sends a pre-email reminder with some questionnaire, some questions on there just to kind of help. I think that helps get the guest in the mindset of the podcast too. I don't do that, but I think it's advantageous to do it. So then you record it. Do you record? Okay, you record in Squadcast.
Yes.
Okay, so what is Squadcast? Because I use Zoom.
It's pretty similar to Zoom. It's a newer, smaller platform, so they have a lot of good customer support, and they're growing a lot.
Okay. All right. Then everything is you hit end, and then she goes to Adobe Audition, where she will then edit the podcast, and then she uploads. So once you have the edited podcast, then you have to upload it somewhere where people are actually going to listen to it. So that is a distribution channel. So she uses Anchor. I use Libsyn. So whatever that means for you, just think about it like that's the place where it's going to then get distributed to anything that you have attached to it. And then once it publishes, so when it publishes, you can actually have those platforms automatically publish it to your feeds for you. We kind of work around that a little bit because sometimes there's a glitch, and I want to make sure that it's not out there with the glitch, and I need to like make sure, because it's all data and it's all technical. And then promoting the podcast, of course, for people to listen to it on social media. So I hope our listeners got all that. And I mean, this is not uncommon. So Amanda doesn't have any steps that, is that I feel is wasted. I feel like all of her steps are the same steps. So my podcast, same concept. There's a Google form. People fill it out. There are 3 questions at the end. One of them, have you listened to the podcast? Like, at least when you get to that question, if you haven't, maybe go and like listen to one real quick and then come back and then hit yes. But I've had people hit no, and I'm like, well, man, come on. The other question I have is, are you military spouse, business owner, or active duty or veteran? And if they hit no on all those, obviously that shakes that out. So then I do the same process as Amanda, where I then, share out that Calendar link so we get them on the schedule. I batch record. I use Libsyn, so Libsyn. It's short for Liberated Syndication. And then I don't do that questionnaire, but I do send a reminder, 24 hours before. And there's a lot of communication, with the guests too. Like as we start going into like Amanda, we may have messaged probably 5 or 6 times on trying to nail down the topic. So you're going to have a little bit of that. And then my editor, his name is Dave. He is amazing. Love Dave. I literally will just send him the raw file. So this is a raw file that I'll send him, and he knows. Dave is like editing this and listening to me talking about him. How cool is that? So Dave knows where to clip it and where to splice it. He adds the video, he adds the there's music in the beginning of mine that he always lays in. And then once he finishes that, he then attaches it into Libsyn and also schedules it on our website. So our website has the ability to put in, it's under like the blog setting, right, where you can like go in and see. We're getting technical, so I start to sound like an idiot, but the thing works on the thing basically. Yep. And then we know when that's going to push out, and then we will make sure that we're tagging the people correctly and stuff like that. And that's where we just want to manually do it because it's just easier to do it that way. Do you think you'll be a podcaster forever?
Probably for a long time. I love it. It's really fun to talk to people and hear their stories and share their stories. So I don't see any reason why I'll stop. And there's so many women, like I batch recorded and they they filled up my calendar, and I was like, what are you doing? Like I had to start deleting stuff because I was like, I didn't know you were going to fill up all the slots. So yeah. So there's so many women to tell their stories, and that was like my biggest fear was like, who am I going to talk to? Like, how am I going to get women to talk to me? But that has not been a problem.
Imagine that, one of the things you were worried about not being a thing that you need to worry about. What advice would you give somebody who's listening that may be considering adding podcasting into their business?
I like the advice you gave about knowing like what you want to talk about. And like you said, it's really hard to say no, but if like I know that I only talk to women veterans, and like I want to talk to male veterans, but that's not what my podcast is about. And so I don't feel as bad about saying no because I'm like, well, I'm sorry, this is what my podcast is about. And there's plenty of other podcasts that they can go listen to about male veterans or whatever their pitch is. And so I try and just stay very narrow and very focused on like what my podcast is about so I don't confuse my listeners.
True. And, your listeners will, like, I love listening to a certain type of story, so I may want to stay in the podcast, that I always know they have the stories and it's not diluted with other stuff. The other question I was going to ask you about podcasting is, do you have an affiliate do you accept advertisers into your podcast? Because I toyed with that, of course.
I do. I have a link on the blog under the podcast thing, and I have had 2 advertisers on the podcast, so that's been exciting to get paid to do what I'm doing anyways. And so
yeah, because this costs money.
Right. It does.
Yeah. I mean, even though you're recording somebody and that could be free, you still have to go into the editing and the time. If you calculate the amount of time that you're spending in it, that could be time that you're, dedicated into another part of your hustle. So, yeah.
Yeah. So, I've been doing that. I did send out pitches to get some of the sponsors. There's a lot of behind the scenes, but I also got someone who saw that website that I had created, and they were like, oh, we want to advertise with you and we know your rates. And so that was really cool.
Nice. So that helps offset the cost of the podcast and maybe put a little walking around money in your pocket. Yeah, there's nothing wrong with that. Before we close up, I want to make sure that people who are listening get everything that there is to know about podcasting from you. Is there anything else that you would like to add?
Well, one thing that I would give as advice is, if you're going to launch your podcast, make sure you don't start with 0, or don't start with some crazy goal of podcasting every day for a year. Record a few interviews. I think I had 15 interviews before I launched my podcast, and I am so glad that I did, because it made it so much easier to launch, having those stories. And then it got the word out, so it was kind of build up for the launch, because I'm talking to people before it actually goes live. So I would try it out and see if you like it, or if there's a need for it, or if you can find people to talk to, and not just dive in and go full throttle. And you can always push your launch date back. Nobody cares except you.
Thank you. I love that. Thank you for that advice. So I think I had maybe 6 or 7 in the can, and the first couple are always going to be a little glitchy. And I mean, as you start to understand what, I hardwire my computer into, the internet so that there aren't any glitches. And you have to kind of go through a couple. That's a really great source of advice. Thank you for that, Amanda. And I couldn't even add anything to that. I think that is so important. And you're right. You can push your launch date back. And I will also add, so we are recording right now for season 4, and I had to take some breaks. So my podcast releases on the 1st and 15th of every month, but in between seasons, I've pulled or paused the podcast because I got so busy on the other things and part of the agency. And that's okay too. It's your thing to do whatever you want to do with it, right? People said that to me too. They're like, you need to be consistently putting out, podcast episodes. And I'm like, I don't though. This is kind of mine.
Right.
Yeah. So how do we get in contact with you, Amanda? Where can people listen to your podcast and find you online?
So you can search pretty much all the podcast apps. I'm not supposed to say that, but I don't know what else you're supposed to say. But I know I'm on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, Stitcher. There's a lot more. Just search Women of the Military and it'll pop up. And then you can also go to my blog, www.airman2mom, that's TOmom.com. And I'm Airman to Mom on all the social media platforms, LinkedIn, Twitter, Facebook, Instagram. I don't know if I forgot one, but
LinkedIn. Yeah, you said them all.
Okay.
You guys, make sure to connect with Amanda Huffman. Amanda, I'm so proud of everything that you're doing, and I cheerlead for you. And I think that this is just the beginning of all the things that are coming your way. Congratulations on your success. You're welcome. And for those that are listening that are interested in podcasting, you've heard it straight from Amanda. So give it a whirl. Go ahead, dive in. Water's just fine.
Yep.
All right. Thank you, Amanda.
Thank you.
Thanks for listening to Drop and Give Me 20, brought to you by Germono Advertising Company in Norfolk, Virginia. Please visit our podcast in iTunes, click on subscribe, and leave us a review. Your support goes a long way. When you subscribe and leave reviews, it helps the guests on our show as well. Jump in and let us know what you think. You can also follow all of our guests on the Drop and Give Me 20 Facebook page. We have Instagram and Twitter. Those handles are Give Me 20 Podcast. I'm your host, Lindsay Germono, and I appreciate you listening to the show.